we are hosting a well-known scientist from Malaysia, actually, who is respectable. My respect for him also, in the work he had done on profiling environmental pollutions in Malaysia and also in the region. So my name is Rahina Ibrahim, your host and moderator for today. I'm a professor at the Faculty of Design and Architecture, University Putra Malaysia. I'm currently the focal lead for the implementation working group of the Global Wastewater Initiative Awareness Program under United Nations Environment Program. I'm the lead researcher for the Smart Sanitation for Water Settlements, a joint project between UNEP and ACT Malaysia. Before we go on, I'd like to thank the Department of Architecture, Faculty of Design and Architecture for organizing this webinar series, number 8 already, on SDG 6, Water and Sanitation. So this webinar series actually is co-organized by UNEP ACT Malaysia from the Global Wastewater Initiative Awareness Program with University Putra Malaysia. I welcome everyone here who are present. The objective are to increase awareness on importance of ocean quality preservation in promoting sustainable livelihood for coastal communities, and two, to share culture-based technologies in the area of sanitation to remote settlement. In each series, we arrange and recommend key speakers from among members of the Global Wastewater Initiative Awareness Program and pilot project partners from Malaysia. So today is the 8th of 9 webinar series planned for the year 2021 under the SDG 6 title. So the webinar series recognize the partner and supporter of SDG 6, University Malaysia Sabah, is proud partner to this program together with Malaysia Industry and Government Group for High-Tech Might. The webinar series is part of the 50th celebration for the establishment of University Putra Malaysia. So ladies and gentlemen, please be informed that all sessions will be recorded for case analysis by United Nations Environment Program. So let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker this afternoon is Prof. Dr. Ahmad Zaharin Aris. So I'm going to call him Prof. Zaharin because we are in Malaysia. Otherwise, Prof. Aris. He's a professor of hydrochemistry and currently the director of International Institute of Aquaculture and Aquatic Sciences. IAQUIS actually. So maybe you can correct me afterward. Based in University Putra Malaysia. So Prof. Zaharin research actually focuses on hydrochemistry, environmental chemistry, and environmental forensic, particularly on the identification, fate, remediation, and health relevance of metals and emerging pollutants in the environment. His work has won many awards and pioneers to many, where some have been used in environmental policies and guidelines ratification locally and internationally. He now leads multidisciplinary research projects as well as environmental translational research activity through working in partnership with policymakers in translating research outputs through public engagement. I would like to recommend the audience to write in the chat box if you have any question from the speaker, and we will gather all the questions at the end of the talk for the Q&A question. So Prof. Zaharin, without further ado, you have 30 minutes to present your ideas, your recommendation, and how we can look into this issue from your perspective. So the floor is yours. I will give you 1 minute, 1 minute before the end. I hope it's sufficient. 1 minute is enough. I don't want to give like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Prof. Rahina. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Very good afternoon. I'd like to thank the program, especially the coordinator, Prof. Rahina, for inviting me to share and also to deliberate some of my research work, especially on the hydrochemistry topics for today's lecture. Well, I started my presentation with this picture. As we can see over here, as a hydrochemist, I tend to be quite literal when it comes into the definition. So from what we can see here, water is a compound consisting of one atom of oxygen and two atoms of the hydrogen. So that is the scientific explanation behind the water. And to the rest of the world, water is much different thing, the stuff of life, where the living of everything is started from the water and our most essential resources. And of course, perhaps the most interesting observation is that the water is defined by what is not that we can see here, where the water is have no color, no light absorptions, no odors. And of course, for us, when we drink water, we actually drink the water, not the chemical solutions that I mentioned before. It contains one oxygen atom and two hydrogen atom. And of course, when we talk about the water with the current understanding, while we are enjoying our water so much, especially in Malaysia, we are actually looking into some other angle of perspective as well. There are 3 out of the people in the world are actually having lack of access to safely manage drinking water services. And this is not because they choose not to have a good water, but this is because absolutely they have no choice to get the good water as what we have in Malaysia, for example. And of course, this is the topic that I'm going to share with all of you today, the invisible water trap, profiling the environmental pollution. So this is something quite interesting, of course, when we're talking about the water. This is something that we need every day, something that we are dealing with every day. And of course, first of all, this is something that I would like to also share with all of you. People in 2020, the earthling that we have now is almost 8 billion. And this dramatic growth has been driven largely by the increasing numbers of people surviving to reproductive age, and also have been accompanied by major changes in fertility rates, increasing urbanizations, and of course, accelerating migration. And with the increasing numbers of people, for sure, the demand of the water will be also increased. And as we can see that, where the current figures stand for almost 8 billion, and it is projected to reach almost 10 billion in 2050, based on the United Nations data, the water scarcity will become one of the major issues in the world by that time. And of course, now we are also facing the same issue. As I mentioned before, 3 out of the 10 people are having lack access to the clean water. So do with the other 2 billion of people that we have now is also having lack access to the proper water system. And with the current projection, the supply and also demand shortfall, as we can see over here, the world population is expected to increase by 2 billion person in the current simulation. In the next 30 years, there are more than 10 billions of people, and water scarcity will be hundreds of million people by the end of the years, where more and more people will getting not enough water. And of course, in Malaysia, even though now we are getting enough water, but somehow this will become a major issue in the next 30 years. And with the current industrial revolution taking place, as we can see over here, we are in the current 4.0 industrial revolution. The industrial revolution impacted the environment, for sure. This is something, the fact and also figures that we really need to understand. And the world saw a major increase in the population, which along with an increase of the living standard, we need new things. We need something that we can use every day, for example. And this has led to the depletions of the natural resources, where people are leading into more attractions of the natural resources. And the use of chemicals, for example, and also fuel factories resulted in increased air and water pollution and an increase in the use of the fossil fuel. As we can see that the started in the 19th century, the heavy metal pollution has been becoming an issue since then. And after that, as we can see, more and more new chemicals has been synthesized and also introduced into the environment. And since then, there are major industrial and also scenario of the environmental degradation has been taken place since ever then. And of course, in the 21st century, there are new emerging pollutant that has been introduced because of the demand arises from the industrial revolutions. And of course, as we can see here, pollution is the progress of making land, water, and also other parts of the environment dirty and not safe or suitable for the use. And then this can be done through the introductions of the contaminants into a natural environment. And of course, contaminant itself doesn't need to be tangible, and things as simple as light, sounds, and also temperature, for example, can be also considered as the pollutants to the environment. And the concentrations of pollutants are increased by years, as we can see from the figures that I show in the chart over here, and where more and more new pollutants are being introduced each day. And scientists has estimated that humans produce more than 10 of thousands chemicals each year, and with new chemicals developed almost every day. And you just imagine that since the first industrial revolution, we are creating more than a millions of new chemical compounds for our daily usage. And when we're talking about the factors affecting demand for water, the industrial revolution is not only the major factors that contribute to the water degradation, but as the population grows, the demand for water will also increase, I mentioned before. And not only that, the land uses, the land changes, for example, the water tariff, okay, the consumer preferences as well, the weather are also the factors that are affecting the demand for the water in terms of the quantity and also the quality. And of course, we can say that the major control are coming from the anthropogenic activities, while the naturogenic factors, for example, coming from the natural activities and also phenomena, may also significantly control the demand for the water supply. And of course, it's been written clearly in the Quran, in the Surah 21 or the Surah Prophet, that we have made every living thing out of the water. And of course, this is the stuff of life. And global chemical output was valued more than 171 billion in 1970, while it's been multiplied to almost 4 trillion in 2013. With that, what we can say here, hundreds of thousands man-made chemicals has been introduced and also synthesized, and then it is estimated that more than 1,000 chemical compounds that we synthesize may have endocrine acting properties. So this is something that we are actually looking forward to learn and also to know more about it. And when we talk about the industrial revolution, since then, weird and also serious health risks to the human have been discovered. And Minamata diseases, for example, was first discovered in Minamata City in Japan, Kyoto Prefecture, Kumatomo Prefecture in 1956, and it was caused because of the industrial release of the metal mercury from the industrial wastewater. And from that, of course, it was released in 1932 and continued until almost nearly 1970. But scientists never figured out that this particular pollutant is actually a culprit to the environment. And of course, these highly toxic chemicals bioaccumulated in the shellfish and also fish around the Minamata Bay and resulted the pollutants and also accumulations in the human body. And of course, further effect of this particular pollutant is the mercury poisoning. And more than 1,700 deaths were recorded because of that particular incident. And not only that, because of the industrial activity also, there are itai diseases and also the blackfoot diseases because of the cadmium and also arsenic pollutants. And when we are talking about the contaminants of emerging concerns, so this is what I'm particularly looking at, the new pollutants, the pollutants that we never thought, that we never discovered before, that we never understand before, or known as the endocrine disrupting compound. And when talking about the EDC, in short, the broad scope of EDC are widely utilized as the active compound for manufacturing of a daily object. So it means that we are actually using this particular compound in our daily activity. And so what is EDC actually? So EDC is actually, and the exogenous and also emerging comprises a wide-ranging scope of the chemical, both natural and also synthetic compound that we actually use it every day. As I mentioned before, there are more than 100,000 of chemical compounds available in the market. And natural EDC include estrogen, as you can see. These are normally found in our human body, while the synthetic hormone, for example, some steroid hormone and also other synthetic disruptors. And apart from the industrial chemicals compound and also their byproducts and processes of, for example, PCB, PPB, PBB, phenolic compound, and also pharmaceuticals, there are also personal care products that we are actually use every day. Okay, for example, the personal care product that we use every day are detergents, deodorants, makeup removal, microbeads, okay, and some other personal care products that are commonly found in our house. And this is quite interesting, the pharmaceutical compound that we found in the environment. that we actually use it. Okay, so while some of the common pharmaceutical compounds used end up in the environment as a pollutant, atenolol, for example, the first compound shown here, is actually used to treat the chest pain and also the hypertension. This is quite common drugs that have been used. So in Malaysia, this particular product is a number one drugs that are being used in our hospital, for example. And ibuprofen, the painkiller and also the menstrual period pain, okay, drugs to be used, and also caffeine, which is actually the central nerve system drugs, okay, that could actually solve many problems, okay, that is the most widely consumed psychoactive drugs. So this is quite common pharmaceutical compound found in our market, and end up this particular compound is actually pollutants to the environment. And of course, when we're talking about the interactions between those particular things, the pollutants and so on, we need to first understand about the interactions of the environment. And of course, the water itself is not only act as the key of life, but more to sustaining and also maintaining the environment. And of course, the self-regulations of the environment is also depending on the water itself. And representations of the geosphere showing a strong interaction with the other spheres of the environment. We can also see that more importantly, the interaction between these three components, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and also the lithosphere. Naturally, the environment will circulate naturally with all elements with balance, but with the human interventions, human anthropogenic activities, and so on, are disturbing the environment. And of course, when we talk about the EDC in the drinking water system, this is actually one of the water sources pollution. And one of the reasons why they end up in our system, in our water system, is because of the inadequate water treatment facility, especially in most of the underdeveloped country. We are still depending on a very conventional water treatment facility. And of course, the conventional water treatment facility are not able to remove these so-called new pollutants in the environment. The one that they can remove is almost like the heavy metals and also some other basic organic pollutant. And this is also because unwarranted water supply security, limited water quality monitoring, and also underdeveloped detection, because most of these particular pollutants are quite new, and some of the methods are yet to able determine the concentrations and also the compound that are available and also accumulate in the environment. And limited epidemiological studies, because some of these particular compounds are still underestimated and also unknown risks. What are the effect or what are the extended effect of these particular compounds, not only to the environment, but of course to the human as well. And also the requirement of the holistic system with the multivariate approach. So this is something where the multidisciplinary approach are very much needed for us to solve this particular problem. And from our record, the EDC monitoring study in Malaysia environment has been conducted in various places, especially in an urbanized river since 2013. And since then, there are continuous approach of monitoring these particular pollutants in the environment. And of course, when we are talking throughout the world, most of the developed countries are looking forward to have a kind of monitoring of this particular pollutant. Their concern is not anymore the heavy metals, but these particular new pollutants to the environment, because they know that these particular compounds are coming from our daily life activities and also objects. So in certain countries, these particular pollutants have been found up to the alarming value, means that there are more than hundreds nanogram per liters of concentration that has been found in their environment. And of course, as we can see over here, Malaysia are considered not left behind, because we have initiated some of this monitoring work to establish some of the baseline information and also database on these particular issues. And of course, when we talk about the EDC environmental pollution that are originated from our daily life objects, as I mentioned before, it comes from the influence of the wastewater treatment plant and also the sewerage treatment plant, because the industrial release of these particular pollutants are not everyone can understand, okay, and also not being enacted in our guidelines. So some of this particular industry are just releasing these particular pollutants in our environment. And coming from the director of the produced by the human, livestock, and also other animals, manufacturing of other application, including medicine production and also pest control, especially the pesticide. And also the environmental processes such as runoff and also infiltration may also one of the factors that bring all these pollutants into the other compartments. And of course, finally, this particular pollutant will end up in our human body as a final receptor. So we are the one who use it, and finally, we are the one who will actually accumulate all those pollutants in our body. So we talk about that. Okay, this particular pollutant is actually uh, hang. All right. So it is originated from everyday objects, okay, including the children toys, okay, phthalates, that is the active compound to create plastics, okay. Plastic drinking bottle, the one that we use every day. So Malaysia are yet to ban all those bottle drinking water that in certain product, they may contain the bisphenol A, BPS, and also BPF. The house dust that may also contain flame retardants and also the pesticides. Thermal crash register, food packaging, okay, all those particular things are containing this particular EDC. And of course, EDC are originated from the things that you buy every day, and that you use this item in your home, and the EDC from these particular items contaminated our wastewater system, and the wastewater plant cannot filter out the EDC, and then the EDC will went back into the environment where the EDC are released in the environment and accumulate in the environmental compartments. And finally, the aquatic organism will accumulate the EDC and enter the food web. As I mentioned before, humans are the final receptor of this particular pollutant from waste into plate, for example. And when we're talking about that, the anthropogenic activity generated multi-class EDCs, such as pharmaceutical, hormone, plasticizers, and also pesticides, are detected in major urbanized rivers in Malaysia, including coastal and also estuarine sediment. So in our work, we are not only looking at the water, we are also looking at the sediment, biological samples, in order for us to understand how this particular pollutant can end up and also moving around in our environment. As I mentioned before, the interaction between the different spheres are very important in order for us to understand. And of course, not only that, we also calculate the risk after we have found all this information, after we have established the database. We need to understand what are the risks posed by this particular pollutant to human. So from here, we calculate either this particular concentrations of pollutant that are available in Malaysian environment poses any risk to human. And from that, what we understand, pharmaceutical compound, for example, were recently detected in some major rivers in Malaysia. As I mentioned, there are quite increasing numbers of usage of the pharmaceutical drugs, active compound in our daily life. And the monitored pharmaceutical, including amoxicillin, caffeine, and some other active ingredients in the psychoactive drugs, have been found in our waterways. And the highest concentrations of pharmaceutical compound were detected in Gombak River, one of the most polluted rivers in Malaysia. And for example, some of the concentration were detected for almost like 100% of the samples collected, and the highest was almost 300 nanogram per liter of concentration. And not only that, from our study, we have also found that the Klang River estuary, one of the most busiest commercial port in Peninsular Malaysia, is surrounded by the various industrial and also aquaculture activities as well as the residential area. So this is a very important and also interesting area to be studied because they involve with so many interactions. And receiving pollutants load mainly from the Klang River and also Langat River. As we know that Klang River and also Langat River is one of the major rivers in Malaysia that supply millions of people for the water resources. And of course, it's a habitat for the various commercial seafood products such as fish, clam, mollusks, and also cockle. So this is where we have found this particular pollutant that are being produced inland and up into our estuary environment. And from that, we also have detected that the transport and also impact of EDC in the drinking water system, the treatment sustainability and also water security is warranted. We need to also explore a smart monitoring and also management of data, especially the environment, by using big data and also Internet of Things. And it also requires some inventions of rapid, robust, sensitive, and also efficient sensor in order for us to sense all these particular new pollutants in the environment. And one of the most interesting compound that we also found in our environment is the 17-alpha atenyl estradiol. That name might be weird, that might be so chemistry, but in short, it is known as the contraceptive pills or 7EE2. This is actually a synthetic hormone that being consumed by most of the women who are actually in plan to having a baby, for example, or they're having imbalanced menstrual cycle, for example. So this particular drugs is actually very common, and you can get it in the pharmacy. Okay, it's quite cheap. Okay, but this particular compound that has been synthesized in 1947 was in the market for almost like 70 years. And you just imagine that the scientists will just figure out that this particular drugs is actually a pollutant to the environment because of the effect of this particular synthetic compound is very, very adverse effect. Okay, so you can see that the estrogen, okay, the one that we have in our body is E1, the normal estrogen, the natural estrogen, but this is actually a synthetic estrogen that we have found in our body as well, that those who are consuming this particular compound. What happened? So from the study, we have found out that the EE2, the 17-alpha-ethylene estradiol, the synthetic hormone, is actually an orally active estrogen, and it's one of the most commonly used medication for the human as well as the livestock and also aquaculture activity. So it has been reported that this particular pollutants has made the fish becoming transgender because of the contraceptive pill, the fish becoming gay. Okay, and of course, the birth control pill is giving rises to transgender fish. What happened? At 4 nanogram per liter, it can give some intersex fish changes. Okay, so it means that the male fish are no longer interested to the female fish. Okay, because there is an intersex changes because of this particular hormone. And the European Commission has regulated 0.035 nanogram per liter, means that whatever water that is being used by humans shouldn't be the concentrations of the EE2 shouldn't be more than 0.035. You just imagine that, okay? 4 nanogram per liter, it can give some intersex changes, while the European Commission recommended regulatory level not more than 0.031 nanogram per liter. So how can we imagine 1 nanogram per liter? Okay, this is nanogram per liter. So to put in analogy, so this is 1 nanogram per liter. 1 nanogram per liter is equivalent to 1 part per trillion. So 1 nanogram per liter is actually 1 drop of water diluted into 20 Olympic size of swimming pool. So you just imagine that. With 4 drops of this particular pollutant, it can give some intersex changes to the lower organism, particularly the fish. Of course, we believe that this particular hormone may also trigger some endocrine disrupting changes in human body. But gladly, okay, if not, then people who are actually a transgender or gay, they might put a blame that they are drinking polluted water, so that's a reason why they're becoming gay or something like that. Okay, but this is what we believe. Okay, so they may trigger the endocrine disrupting compound of the human body as well. So this is what we have found. Okay, from our review, we have found out that a biota that being exposed to this particular EE2 is also provided with this some particular changes of this hormone. So what they do, they attack the nuclear receptors, okay, of this particular EDC, and finally the psychological functions of the bioorganisms will be affected, including the reproductive system, metabolisms, okay, the central nervous system, and also including the growth and also the development. So how they attack us, how it works, okay, so this is the normal nucleus that we found in our body. So this is how our system works. And the hormone that mimics, okay, the one that we are being using every day, the EDC, will actually mimic the natural hormone. So when it absorbs into the body, the endocrine disrupting compound can decrease or increase the normal hormone value. And finally, the natural hormone, the response of our cells couldn't recognize which one is actually the normal one, which one is the synthetic one. So finally, they will release some unnecessary hormone into our body. So this is a layman things that we need to understand. And finally, it's not only the nucleus matter, but it now become a population and also community matters, because this particular endocrine system will attack the nucleus, and then the cell generation will be also affected. Finally, the tissue, they will generate more tissues, and finally, they will spread as a cancer cells, and then the organ will be affected, the organ system, and finally, the individual will be also finally affected. And not only that, okay, from the study conducted, the use of the EDC in our daily life activity may also increase, for example, the obesity among the children. They will hit the puberty early, for example, and low birth weight, and then the development of dysfunctions, and then breast cancer. These are among quite common diseases, okay, that we have found almost every day. Okay, one of the major factors that contribute to this particular modern health epidemics is because of this EDC, exposure to the human as well. And the EDC, via daily dietary intake, so from our study, we have also found that the fishes is one of the major routes of this particular pollutants, okay, and then the EDC in aquatic system, for example, the aquatic food, especially the fishes, may also accumulate this particular pollutant and up into our body. And ocean, through its product, the marine organism, is an additional and also crucial route of the human exposure to the health risks associated to the EDC. And this is what we have found. This particular EDC may accumulate in a different part of the fishes, for example, including the brain, okay, the livers, and also some other important part of the fish. From our dissection, we also found out that the microplastic, okay, end up in the bodies of the fish. And when we're talking about the assessment of the environment, okay, so it's quite complicated. Okay, while the hydrochemical assessment involves 6 different steps, from the problem analysis to the final result interpretation and also dissemination, the environment itself is a very dynamic and also complex. So we may not only depends on one single aspect of the environment for us to understand, but we need to have a multidisciplinary approach in order for us to understand. So the common problem in the environmental study, especially the hydrochemistry study, is because of the cause and also effect relationship. Is a very complex, the spatio-temporal dimension, upscaling process to a basin scale. So in order for us to understand the environment itself, we need to study at a very large scale. Sometimes the missing data may be also a problem if we depend on the secondary data. And the environment itself involved with a very large and also complex data set. Some of the data requirement are also very hard to get, and also complex and also dynamic interpretation between the different compartments and also linkages of the spheres. And that's a reason why we are proposing the environmental forensics as one of the tools to bridge the gap between the science and also the art of deduction. So our approach is not only looking at the hard sciences to solve the problem, but we may also incorporated some of the social sciences approach in our discipline. So the identification, the policy rectification, the health risk assessment, the modeling and also interpretation is very important in order for us to come up with a holistic approach of the environmental understanding. And from sources to solutions, our research work not only looking at the environmental monitoring aspect, we are also looking at the treatment and also remediation aspect, environmental modeling, in order for us to predict and also to look into what the extent of this particular environmental problem to the environment, and also the resources management, the risk assessment, perception, study, the knowledge, attitude, and also perceptions of the people is also very important for us to understand. And these are much related to the behavior of people in managing and also controlling the environment. So this is where the outcome of the environmental protection, the public awareness, legislative, and also policy rectification, as well the resources and also supply security can be warranted. And as I mentioned before, the approaches that we use are multidisciplinary approaches. We may require some medical doctors, okay, the chemists, environmental forensic, the material sciences person, analytical sciences, health sciences, okay, the social scientists to work together in order for us to understand the aspect of the sources to solution. And of course, in the environmental forensic approach, it requires a lot of the analytical approach in order for us to detect and also sense these particular pollutants in the environment. And the challenges for the analysis of the EDC environment is because of the development of the optimizations method will require very complex environmental matrices, and the presence of the EDC is at a trace level. As I mentioned before, it exists at the nanogram per liter of concentration. Okay, most of the machines are not able to detect at that lower concentration, but somehow at 1 nanogram per liter, at 0.035 nanogram per liter, it can still give some significant effect to the human health. And of course, this is what we have found. Some of our recent studies have reported that we have found some multi-class EDC in the Israel ecosystem. as we know that the estuarine ecosystem is the sink of pollutant, because all of the human activities will bring all this pollutant and up in our estuarine ecosystem. So we have found out that certain pollutant may up to 40 nanogram per liter in the surface water, up to 70 nanogram per liter in the sediment, and some of this particular pollutant accumulate in most of the major species of our aquaculture product, including the Tenellus and also Peonia fish, okay, sea grouper, and also the crustopod mollusks, okay, the Nellitia that are commonly found in our coastal environment. And from our multicultural system, okay, so these are the fish that we have also found, okay, this particular pollutant has accumulated in our fisheries product as well. And not only that, the pollutants that are visible can be easily identified and also provided with the mitigation measures, while some that exist as invisibles, okay, are the things that we should worry about. The example given here are the microbeads that have been particularly used in our facial products. I'm very sure that some of you are using these particular products also almost every day. So this is where we can actually opt an option not to use this particular product, because these particular microbeads can actually becoming a very serious matter to our environment, because the microplastic product have been found traveling, okay, into almost most of the remote areas, for example, and accumulated in our fisheries product as well. So this is what we have found as well from our study at a 100 micrometer scales. The selected microplastic has been found in our gastropod. Okay, the gastropod collected in our coastal area is also accumulating this particular microplastics. Okay, those microplastics are coming from the fibers, okay, the clothes that we use, the face masks, okay, and including the plastic that we are daily use. And this is also what we have found. Okay, so we categorize the fragments. Okay, some are quite big, and it's quite surprisingly to see that this particular bioorganisms are also accumulating this in their system. And as I mentioned before, it's not enough and it is not complete if we are only looking at the analytical approach to understand the environment. So in our work, we are also incorporating the social sciences approach by looking at the questionnaire approach in order for us to understand the EDC exposure among the Malaysian people. So we develop our own questionnaire to understand the demographic features and also the daily intake in order for us to calculate what will be the risk posed by this particular pollutants to the Malaysian population. And from that, our concern is because the population growth, urbanization, and also industrialization, complex water combinations, increased new chemical product, and also waste, including the cost of water facilities. Some of our people are not willing to pay high water tariff. Okay, if we are incorporating some of the advanced technology system, of course, we will increase the water tariff, and that's the reason why some of the people doesn't care about it. Okay, and from our survey, we have also found out that some people are not aware that they are actually contributing to this particular problem. In one survey that we have conducted, unused or expired medicine has been just thrown away in our normal waste system, for example, without proper handling. Okay, unused medicine, expired medicine should be handled properly, where the return back policy in certain hospital should be fully incorporated so that it can be specially handled, okay, without contaminating the environment. And the risk management, okay, the review of the existing drinking water regulations are needed, because our current, especially the Malaysian current drinking water regulations are inadequate to address this new pollutant in our environment. This is because our current regulations are only looking at this particular pollutant, not included all those new pollutants that I mentioned before. Of course, we can't list out all those thousands of chemical compounds in our guideline, but in most of the developed countries, they are actually looking at this new updates of lists for their drinking water regulation. And of course, in Malaysian drinking water quality guideline, there are absence of most of EDC that being reported elsewhere. And source of water protection, so this is where the risk management are very important. Our current Environmental Quality Act 1974 and also its regulation are still containing some loopholes in terms of its legislation. because the inclusions of pharmaceuticals, contaminations, okay, as part of the waste and also parameters in the legislation should be looked into. And of course, the absence of pharmaceuticals and also continuous pharmaceutical pollutions, causes and also effect in our Environmental Quality Act are still lacking. So this is where we need to provide some rectification on the related sources of water contaminants and also protection from the hazardous substances, provision related to the monitoring, and also provision related to the surveillance of the water system. And the risk governance, okay, what we have found, the public perceive of the endocrine disrupting compound in drinking water, some people are still unknown about the risk perception. That's the reason why, as mentioned before, they just throw away all those unused or expired medicine in their toilet, for example. So they just flush away all those unused system. There is a different dimension of the risk perception. People who are living in the urban area with the people who are living in the suburban area are having different risk perception, for example. And there is a need of risk communication and also governance, risk behavior development, adverse impact, and also knowledge gap, and also role and regulation. Not only the government, not only the public who are playing the role, but we need a two-way communication, a two-way different approach in order for us to come up with the holistic multivariate approach intervention system. So what we need to know, and why do EDC is matter? Because as I mentioned before, EDC presence in the environment was commonly a mixture, and the health effect of this particular mixture are even more worse compared to the single compound. EDC is also able to penetrate and also cause harmful biological impact at low dosage, nanogram per liter, or even at picogram per liter. Long-term exposure, the accumulations of EDC in our body will trigger more and more health issue. Analysis and also occurrence of EDC in a different environmental compartments with a potential exposure risk will provide some ecological and also human effect. And the analysis of the occurrence of EDC will reveal that the sources of pollution, ineffective treatment, the political willingness, and also potential human exposure to EDC via diary intake. And adverse impact and knowledge gap in the EDC mixture, where we need address properly for the effective mitigation and also prevention. Regulatory effort are solely required when implementation and also maintenance of the strong world-class standard. So this is where we need to communicate with some of the developed countries, for example, where they're rectifying their standard almost every year. For example, the European commissions, okay, the European unions have been adopting a new list of the contaminants in their drinking water standard, for example. And even in the United States, even though they are not being enacted, but they have put these particular pollutants in their watch list. And efficient water quality monitoring system, some mitigation, and also the public awareness and also political obligation is needed in supporting the preventive and also intervention solution for the environmental safety purposes. And of course, most important, yeah.
We have 1 minute for you.
Okay, I'm almost done with the presentation.
Okay, great.
And also the risk perception, potential meditating the influence of the particular pollution. And of course, the holistic system, the integrated solution of the multivariate approach is needed. As I mentioned before, the public involvement and awareness, okay, the risk ecological regulations, existing legislation, policy base is very important. And of course, the need of the big data analytics for the environmental management is very important in order for us to look into uncover hidden pattern and also correlation inside. And the IoT and also environmental monitoring, okay, with the integrations of the system and also the environmental conditions are very much needed for the big data analytics. And of course, this is just a movie that I love to also share, the Inferno. One of the solutions that they suggest in order for us to solve the environmental problem is to kill people, okay, to reduce the 8 billions of people into just 1 billion, and all those environmental problems will be just settled. So this is very ridiculous, okay, a very radical approach, but of course we have more better approach that we can actually look into. For example, the risk communication and also the governance, the community-based risk governance with two-way interactive communication. The bottom-up approach, okay, as I mentioned before, is very important, where the government need to listen from the public, where the bottom-up approach create salient values in the risk processing. So a better understanding will be created, adequate regulatory effort, and also communication, effective dissemination among the peoples, and also active public involvement are very important in order for us to at least solve some of this particular issue. With that, I end my presentation, and I hope that some of you will enjoy and also understand to this particular issue. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Prof. Yeah, I don't want to stop you earlier just now because the slides get more interesting towards the end. So there are several questions here that came up in the chat. So I ask you the first easy ones first here before we go on. So from Nurul, yeah, two questions. You mentioned about the effects of aquatic organism like fishes. How long about the long-term effect of exposure via drinking of this existing and emerging EDC to human before it affected human health actually?
Yeah. As I mentioned before, okay, this particular pollutant is a very synthetic. They are very robust. They are very strong in the environment. Normal condition couldn't couldn't remediate, and also couldn't eliminate this particular pollutant in the environment. So a long-term exposure of this particular pollutant for sure will bring some of the health issue, as I mentioned before. They will trigger and also affect our endocrine system. And finally, of course, there are more and more cancer cases, obesity, hit puberty early, and of course, some of the unknown effect to the human as well. Okay, of course, very small pollutions, okay, accumulate in our body over the time, okay, will bring more problems, for example. So there are differences between the bioaccumulations and also the biotranslocation, for example, from one body into another, okay, from fishes into the human. Those activity will for sure bring effect to the human health.
Okay, so someone asked, are you saying that the bottled water may no longer be considered safe?
Yeah, but in Malaysia, this
Possible.
yeah, in Malaysia is still quite common, as we can see that, yeah, because
I see.
yeah, it's quite cheap, yeah, but most in the developed country, they are still start banning of this particular
I
usage of
see.
plastic. Yeah.
Okay. So another long question here by Saslinda Kamaruzaman. Yeah. Thanks for the interesting talk. It is indeed interesting talk. So she said that most of the analytical instrument have its own detection limitation and unable to detect organic or inorganic pollutant at the PPT level. So is there any specific or selective sample preparation needed to enrich the concentration of the compound? Or have you done any study to that, or increase the detection limit of the instrument? It's more like technology advancement for detection actually from your
Oh,
study?
yes. Yeah. This is actually one of the major issue that we are dealing with. Okay, the reason why this particular pollutant are underreported is because of most of the sample preparations. Okay, the method of detection are still underdeveloped. So this is where our laboratory are actually creating and also developing a new method of detection. Okay, because the usage of these chemicals and also instrument to detect this particular pollutant are quite expensive. Okay, because not all laboratory, not all instrument are able to detect this. So this is because the method and also the compound are quite difficult for us to understand. And so this is a reason why the continuous effort of the method development are still ongoing. I don't say that my method is the best, but our method is actually proven to be one of the most referred method, okay, for the EDC in the biological samples and also the water, because we keep updating the new method and also optimizing the method so that we can detect to the most lowest and also to the new compound that being listed.
Okay. Thank you. For anyone who doesn't know Prof. Ahmad Zaharin, he's one of the youngest professor from University Putra Malaysia. I have to mention that. And also he is the youngest fellow at the Academy Science Malaysia. So congratulations, Prof. Okay,
Thank you.
so now, yeah, I have to mention that in case people have query. Uh, Regarding this EDC, it's quite I'm shocked actually to know about this birth control and also the transgender fish also. You know, usually it's very sad that when this kind of pollution takes place only when the damages occur to the community that only will the awareness increase. What's happening? People keep asking what's happening. So this
Mm.
action could have been taken earlier on, but the obvious evidence were not present. So from your experience, you mentioned just now about the mitigation. Maybe it could take a little bit more time to explain. So if we do not want to repeat those things, or now that you have understood some of the phenomena that's causing this problem to kick off, so what would be a
Mm.
best remedial action that you could take or you could propose to the government while the symptoms are not yet that obvious to many or experienced by the local?
Wow, that is quite tough question, I believe. Uh, well, of course, when we are dealing with the environment, it require effort not only from the stakeholders, not only from the government, but also the public as
Prof,
well.
excuse
Uh,
me, would you like to show us some of the slides that would help you to explain the,
okay, all right,
yeah,
yeah.
because you were very fast at the end there.
Yeah, towards the end, I'm not explaining in detail about that. Okay, so this is about the risk, as I mentioned before, and of course, with that, yeah, which one would be the best?
Yeah, we don't want the
Okay.
inferno in Malaysia.
Uh, okay, so this is actually
Okay.
what happened. Okay, so it required not only one party to involve with this particular exercise, and of course, the government. The first thing that I always believe is actually the political willingness. The government need to put the environment as their main priority, as their main agenda, because as we know that when the environment being compromised, the effect is not only to the environment, not only to the ecosystem, it can also trigger the economy, the social, as well as some other block change of effect. Okay, so this is what we need to really understand. And of course, in order for us to make sure that the same thing is not happen, by taking some examples on what happened in Sungai Kim Kim, Kim Kim River, I believe that most of
Mm,
Malaysians are aware about the issue happened in Kim Kim River. The main reasons that particular thing happened is because, as I mentioned before, because of the types of the pollution. In our enactment, there have been listed that, for example, the industrial, when they want to release their effluent into the river, they must make sure that the BOD level, for example, or the COD level, the chemical oxygen demand and also the biological oxygen demand, shouldn't be above a certain limit that they have been listed in their regulation, for example. So when the factory are releasing those particular effluent, they are following that. They know that they should follow that because this is being enacted in our regulation. But there is a loophole behind that people or some of the stakeholder doesn't understand. The BOD and COD, for example, is just an indicator. When the COD is low, then you need to go into more deeper analysis. What are the causes that the COD is low, for example? And of course, it might come from this unknown pollution, for example. Okay, the factory are releasing thousands, hundreds of unknown chemical that are not being listed. So this is also an issue when we bring these particular things into a legal, okay? So they will say that I'm following all those enactment, I'm following all those guidelines. My BOD, COD levels are low compared to the guideline. So why you want to charge me? So this is where the loopholes are actually taking place because most of the unknown pollution are actually being released into our environment. So this is relatively new and also out of listed under our enactment. So this is also one of the major issue. And not only that, the sources of pollution. In Malaysia, the major culprit to our water issue is because of the non-point source of pollution. Uh, Point source of pollution coming from the industry, for example, can be easily detected, can be easily identified. But most of our problem are actually coming from the non-point source of pollution. This is what happened in Kim Kim River and even in Selangor River. So this is actually, as you can see, that almost every month, the Selangor rivers are seriously being affected by this non-point source of pollution because we do not know where does it come from, what are the main things that have been released into the rivers and so on. So these are the three things that we need to actually settle first in order for us to come up with a best mitigation measures. And of course, not forgot to mention the big data analytics, for example. It's no longer that we should depend on the water monitoring exercise itself for the environmental control and also mitigation. As I mentioned before, some of these particular pollutants are unknown. So in order for us to detect this alien compound, this alien pollutant in the environment, we need to cross-referencing our database with, for example, the customs, where they have all those import and also export chemicals in Malaysian market, for example. So when we are cross-referencing all those database together, we can actually go into a more detailed analysis and also can understand the environment better. So this is where I'm always promoting that the environment itself is not only depending on the environmental data, we need to also have all those integration data in order for us to understand what is actually happened in the environment. We need to have the social data, we need to have the economy data, we need to have health data, all those data to be integrated together under one big umbrella, the big data analytics, so that we can actually have all those cross-referencing understanding on the environmental issues.
Okay, thank you. Still, I have many questions, but time is running out. So if any one of you have more questions, you can just do you mind putting in your email in the chat if anyone wants to ask you?
Yeah, this is my contract, right? My laboratory website, hydrochemistry.upm.edu.my. If you need to have more information, some public engagement information, you can just log in into our website. And then this is my email, zaharin@upm.edu.my, and also the Twitter. I always love to share some of our finding, some of the public engagement materials in my Twitter. I don't really go into Facebook. For me, yeah, Facebook is quite difficult. I enjoy Twitter much. Okay, so if you need to communicate and you have any idea of something, you can just communicate me with this medium.
Okay, so thank you. So you have the information there. Also, please register your attendance at the Google form. If you wish to have what I call a small token of attendance to this talk, then make sure your name and your email address is stated very well in the Google form. Okay. So I think I will have to close this. It's been very exciting for me also. Some things are new, yeah, and from a different perspective, very fresh perspective. And I like to congratulate Prof. Zarin because he's one of the key person here looking into translational and also multidisciplinary research team, project team, and all that in order for him to make sure that the environment is very well taken care of. So we have now come to the end of the 8th webinar series for SDG 6, Water and Sanitation, co-organized by UNEP and ACT Malaysia with University Putra Malaysia. So today's topic is really enlightening for me, and I hope for many of you out there who are still unaware how environmental scientists have been monitoring our water pollution sources and looking at ways to implement new policies to arrest them. So I'm pleased to announce to everyone about the upcoming virtual symposium on wastewater and sanitation on 18th and 19th of November this month. It is organized by the Global Wastewater Initiative under UNEP in conjunction with the United Nations World Toilet Day on 19th November 2021. It become a very critical agenda because if you hear just now excreta from human, also something else about from animal also, it can cause a lot of environmental degradation. And the worst case is impacted the human life actually. So on behalf of the Global Wastewater Initiative, we hope to meet everyone at the virtual symposium again. This time we have more experts from 3 continents speaking actually on these 2 days. For Malaysia time is 8:30 to 10:30, 2 hours only over 2 days. So love your environment and prosper your community. Be safe and stay safe. So thank you everyone. Rahina Ibrahim signing off for today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Prof.
you, Prof.
Assalamualaikum.